Awakening with Brahma Kumaris.
ओम शांति। अवेकनिंग विद ब्रह्मा कुमारीज में आज फिर आप सबका स्वागत करते हैं। जो हम बातचीत करते आ रहे हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं इस बात की अनुभूति देता है कि हम कौन हैं। मैं कौन हूँ ये समझने के बाद जब ज़िंदगी में पूरे ज्ञान को उतारा है तब ज़िंदगी एक नए नज़रिए से देखने को मिल रही है। सारी परेशानियाँ कहीं ना कहीं सिचुएशंस जो आ रही हैं वो अब दूर होती जा रही हैं। और जब हमारे अनुभव होने लगते हैं, जिस तरह के आपके ईमेल्स हमें आ रहे हैं, जिस तरह के कॉल्स आ रहे हैं, कहीं ना कहीं वो एक्सपीरियंसेस जो हैं वो आपके जीवन को परिवर्तित कर रहे हैं। हमने हर बार कहा है कि अनुभव ही जो है वो आगे बढ़ता जाएगा। जब तक हम अनुभव नहीं करेंगे तब तक हम उसे एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर पाएंगे। तो आज हमारे साथ एक ऐसी शख्सियत है जो पिछले 33 सालों से इस ईश्वरीय विश्वविद्यालय के साथ जुड़ी हैं और ब्रह्मा कुमारी इसकी पूरी फिलॉसफी को फॉलो करती हुई आज जो है इस मुकाम पर हैं कि अपने एक्सपीरियंस हमारे साथ शेयर कर पा रहे हैं। ख़ास सिडनी से हमारे साथ हैं ब्रदर चार्ली, जिन्होंने ना सिर्फ अपने प्रोफेशन को तिलांजलि देकर पूरी तरह से ब्रह्मा कुमारी की इस फिलॉसफी को, इस ईश्वरीय विश्वविद्यालय को डेडिकेट किया है अपनी लाइफ को, और साथ ही ऑस्ट्रेलिया में जितने भी सेंटर्स हैं उनको वो हैंडल कर रहे हैं। तो आज हमारा बहुत बड़ा सौभाग्य हमारे साथ हैं ख़ास सिडनी से आए ब्रदर चार्ली। हम उनका बहुत बहुत स्वागत करते हैं। अ वेरी वार्म वेलकम टू अवेकनिंग ब्रदर चार्ली। ओम शांति।
Om Shanti. Thank you very much, Kanupriya.
It's a great privilege to have you, sir, here today. Before we talk about anything else, there's a lot which happened, 33 years ago. You were just 22. So 22 is a very tender age. I just talked to people and we just said that 33 years is like much more than 22. So you've been here for longer than where you were. So what really happened at 22? And can we look at the Charlie who was there
Before.
Yeah.
Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I actually grew up in Melbourne and all my family lives in Melbourne. And I would say I was quite a happy child, but I would say I was always a seeker, a searcher
Search.
type of personality. And, I finished my schooling and I studied architecture. I went to Melbourne University. But as I grew older, I had this sort of feeling in me that there was something more important for me to learn, but I couldn't really intellectualize exactly what that was. And when I was just really 20 years old, I said to my parents that, can I take some time out? Because I just need to follow this feeling. And my parents are very lovely like that. They respected it. So I see often my education, I wandered around the world for 3 years and I spent time, actually I spent quite a lot of time in India.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, in Europe, and I lived everywhere, and it wasn't a conscious thing. But
It just happened.
Yeah. I just found myself in religious communities with Hindus, with yogis, with Muslims, with the Dalai Lama, with Christians, with Buddhists. And it was an interesting thing for me because really as a young person, I was fascinated in the human mind, but I wasn't interested in religion. It was like a sort of a conflict. In
Those
that
traditions, actually were never attractive to you.
they didn't really attract me because it seemed like, and when I lived in these religious communities, to be very open with you, I really admired the people because of their belief, but it seemed stagnant. It didn't seem like there was real spirituality. This is just a young person, the way I was thinking at that time. But I settled in London, I was working in London, and I came across the Brahma Kumaris when I was just 22 in London.
So what is it that actually made you feel that no, there is no tradition being followed and this is where you want to be?
I suppose in many of the communities I stayed, it seemed like people were just going through the motions. What was always been important to me is how do you experience something? There's a lot of knowledge and there's beautiful orators of knowledge. There's a lot of belief and faith, but not much inner experience. And I find that when you just know stuff and believe stuff, it can become dogmatic. My truth is the right truth, your truth is the wrong truth. And so we see the world.
Then the conflict starts happening,
We see the conflict which we see in the world today.
Yeah.
And what I was always interested in was how do you translate spiritual philosophy, spiritual knowledge into a deep, rich inner feeling that transforms you and really makes your life better. And what I noticed is that I met so many lovely people. They told me so many things. There was a lot of faith, but I didn't feel on the faces and the feelings there was much spiritual experience. And to be honest, when I was living in London, I often called London like a spiritual supermarket in those days because everything was there and I went to everything. And I went to one place where I did meet the Brahma Kumaris. And actually it's interesting because how do we learn? I think we do learn intellectually, but more it's what we feel, isn't it? And as soon as I met these sisters...
You knew that this is where, actually it maybe with you it might have happened that way, that sometimes a lot of people have shared with us that we felt this is what I was looking for.
Yeah.
You've been a wanderer actually.
Yeah.
You've been searching, you've been going to different places because why you went to those places, this is something was calling you.
That's right.
But you felt this is my calling.
Yes.
But I want to ask you actually.
No, it's true because I think interestingly, just seeing their faces and the vibrations, I felt they had something. There was really, it wasn't just talking about inner peace. I could see on their faces and in their eyes there was something there. And so I pursued it. I began to attend the lessons. And I suppose a lot of it just made sense to me. And interestingly, I often felt it was something which I already knew, but someone was reminding me of it. You know that feeling? As a child, you think about things and you talk to your parents about things, but often the world is very different. But these people were saying things that I'd often thought a lot of my life.
That's very true. Actually, अपने सभी दर्शकों के साथ भी हम यही शेयर करना चाहेंगे कि एक खोजी, एक वैंडरर की तरह जब हम तलाश रहे होते हैं, चाहे हम धार्मिक संस्थानों में जा रहे हैं या अलग अलग धर्मों की तरफ जा रहे हैं, कहीं ना कहीं जहाँ हमें ग्राउंडिंग मिल जाती है, हमें लगता है कि यही हम तलाश रहे थे, यही हुआ भाई चार्ली के साथ। और यहाँ जो है, यहाँ उन्हें लगा कि इट वाज लाइक होम कमिंग। वही बातें जो कहीं ना कहीं मेरे दिल में थी, उनकी अपने बचपन से गुजरते हुए थी, वो यहाँ एक सच्चाई के रूप में सामने आई, एक वही बात सामने आई और वो जीवन में उतरती गई। नाउ विल टॉक अबाउट द एक्सपीरियंस यू हैड। यू जस्ट सेड दैट फॉर मी एक्सपीरियंस वाज द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट, I should say the litmus test, because yes, very true. We've all been hearing the kind of knowledge. I think in India especially, we are incorporated in so much of spiritual and religious teachings that we all knew about soul. We had all heard about soul. We had all heard about God, and we live with it actually. But then again, experience is what makes a difference.
It is so true. I've read a lot of statistics about beliefs of the different cultures around the world, and the majority of humanity, wherever they live, 80% plus, do believe there's something more than a physical body, but virtually no one experiences it. And what happened for me? I began to meditate at the center, and I really did have the feeling of being something different from my body. I really felt like I was the soul centered in the forehead. And automatically I found that created a really calm feeling in my mind. But probably the main thing was that as a young person, in a country like I live, most are Christian, when you're about 13 years old, you're confirmed in the church. It's a formal entry. And I went to those lessons, even though my parents weren't very Christian or religious, but they send their children.
That's the right way to lead.
That's right.
Yes,
and it's good values, that sort of thing.
Yes.
But when I finished those classes, they said, well, what do you feel? And I said, well, Mum and Dad, I think I'm an atheist, which wasn't the aim of the classes.
I just want to ask you here something, because you've talked about something which is totally religious. I just want to ask, and at times I also feel that, I'm just sharing it with you, religion has nothing to do with God,
Yeah.
Somewhere religion is the right kind of life one should lead.
Yeah.
But if we say that religion is everything related to God, I feel no. Because if it would have been related to God, it wouldn't have been different for different people.
Yeah, that's so true.
So whichever suited, whichever kind of lifestyle suited to different particular areas of the world, They made religion like that.
That's right.
There's the right kind of lifestyle which you should follow.
That's right.
Somewhere. But then deep within us, it has been incorporated that religion is everything to do with him.
You're just speaking exactly how I felt because, you know, at least, and I'm just sharing my own experience, in the Christian view, God was a very authoritarian, judgmental, punishing personality. And as a young child, really,
You're afraid.
yeah, fear. And so that's how I was. But very quickly I became like agnostic. And the same thing happened to me as you, that when I actually, you know, someone told me that 78% of the wars in the world were begun by religions. That's a historian. And I began to think like this, you know, well, why? And actually for me, I respect all religions a lot, but when I separated God and religion, that was when God became something important in my life. And when I began to meditate, I, you know, had such an experience of love. And I am saying I felt I had a loving family, I had a good life, a lot of close friends. I was happy, but it was a unique and quality of love. And I can remember my first experience. It was such a powerful feeling. It just changed me, you know, because it was like a love that has really no conditions attached. It is really the love I think most people search for in our relationships with each other.
Definitely. Very true. That unconditional love, when it bestows you, when it showers, and say you, it's actually unexplainable, but then this is something which actually happens. I can understand what you must have felt. The moment we feel that, we don't want anything else actually.
That's true.
And then we want to live with that.
Yeah.
Then each moment, my search becomes much more stronger for that kind of love.
Yeah, I think it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. Because, you know, many times I've thought that I feel at the heart of human life is the search to find true love. And what do? We invest our heart in relationships with our family. It's the most natural thing. But there's one big dilemma, and that is that no relationship is permanent. That's the human dilemma. We give our heart, we give everything, but whether it's change, whether it's conflict, whether it's death, no relationship is permanent. And I think that the real love that is in our memory is that love of God. But sometimes it's not just a belief. That's what I learned in the Brahma Kumaris, because we can have faith in God and experience something, but it's a real resonating relationship. And that's what I've tasted. And really, I changed a lot. If you'd known me before and known me now.
That really happens.
Yeah, I changed a lot, actually.
Yeah, I can understand that, you know, because once you've experienced it, then
Yeah.
actually all those, you know, all these, those needs for being loved and then, you know, asking for attention and looking for things, those actually materialistic things actually fall back. Another thing which I want to ask is that your experience with God's love made you realize that this is what you're, you know, searching for. Then when was it that you decided that you would like to be here permanently? You know, this is what your calling is. A lot of people are there who experience these things but still would like to keep a professional life, you know, would like to continue with the kind of work they are leading. And then being a part of this university and being a part of in the Seva. So how is it, when was it that you took a decision?
You know, earlier I was saying I was traveling and living in different communities, and actually, to be honest, at that time I thought I would return to Australia and study social work or something and join an international agency with the United Nations or something like that, because you can see there's so much suffering in this world. So I began to move in that direction. When I began to meditate and my mind changed so much, the quality of the feeling, thinking, my personality, I began to feel, well, this is actually what people need, is this, if I can say, this internal social work, really. And so it was never really, it's interesting, I never made a conscious decision. But as I began to meditate, and because at least in those days outside of India there's very few centres of the Brahma Kumaris, I began to teach courses, and actually people were very receptive, and here I am, 33 years.
And this, it means decision was made for you.
Like
At
that.
times it happens, you know. बिल्कुल बहुत बार जो है वो निर्णय हमारे लिए ले लिया जाता है जब हम again, you know, when we give in, when we actually, this happens.
It does.
Once we give in that, okay, let's see, let's flow with the current because we are happy. We have found our peace, we found our grounding. Now let's see how the current takes us.
That's
and that is,
true.
I think, the way it happened with you. The
Yeah,
decision was taken for you.
Yeah.
He wanted you to actually work towards it. And how it started spreading. You said when you, like 33 years ago, not many centers were there.
Yeah.
So your first experience, first brush with resistance, it ever came?
When I first was in England for the first 18 months or so, and I hadn't seen my family for 3 or 4 years. So as I began to sort of get involved with this, I decided I should go home and see my family. And I went via India. And when I was here, actually in the headquarters of the Brahma Kumaris in Mount Abu, someone just said to me, why don't you open a centre in Melbourne? That's where my family is. So when I went back, I spent some time, I lived with my parents, and then my father, he's a very kind person. He offered to open a centre, he offered to do it. And so, yes, I think everywhere there is some resistance. I tend to find people in Australia are generally very open, and meditation is something extremely popular. It's very interesting. Actually, I was in Bombay about 2 years ago, and I was going to a lot of the computer colleges giving talks. And I asked a lot of the young people who meditates, and very few put up their hand. I said, if I asked in Australia, 15-20% would have tried meditation and practice, because it's actually, people know today, unless we do something for our mind and our heart, unless we do something, life is very challenging. You need some internal sustenance.
Yeah. Here I want to ask you something, Brother Charlie. Is you belong to a family which is very loving. You had loving friends, you had loving relations. But you changed. You said you changed. And for the family, it becomes very difficult to perceive a person who is changed. They are afraid because we are so resistant to change.
We are. Yes.
It may be for good, but we can't accept it. We
Yes.
don't like it. I'm saying anything changing, any person changing, any of the person who is ours. We feel he belongs to us and he's changing. We don't like that. So you felt any of this kind of resistance from anyone?
I did, a little bit, yes. I mean, it's very interesting what you say, because many times I find people are always saying society should change, the country should change, the politicians should change, everyone should change, but don't ask me to change. And it's no doubt, it's a little bit threatening. I mean, my immediate family was good, except for my mother. My mother was a little bit resistant.
You're the blue-eyed boy.
Every mother's son, but...
No, but you are the literally blue-eyed, right?
Yeah, I am. But she was very good. She's very open to different ideas as well.
But she didn't want to let go.
She loved philosophy, so she didn't, yeah. And I think, like you said, anyone who changes, like I changed my diet, I became a vegetarian. And, we grow up in a world where people will drink alcohol. I never drank much, but it's a natural thing to do there. I stopped drinking. But I never moralized to anyone because people are very sensitive to that sort of thing there. I just changed myself. But I still spend time with people and with friends and everything. And in time and I find these days when I see a lot of them, they can see that...
They feel that's the right kind of life, actually.
Yeah, because as everyone has a lot of problems today, and I feel, what we teach a lot in Australia, we need balance in life. We need time for the family, we need time for work, we need time for me. It's not selfish. And unless we give time for me, life really doesn't move forward. And I think a lot of people are starting to do that. So,
But here, what we are facing, actually, I wanted to share it with your experience. A lot of people who are experiencing it is when they want to change, when they take up this life, their loved ones don't like it. There is a lot of resistance, and they feel, threatened once.
Yes.
And the person who is changing, who wants to follow this life, he feels very sad, and it's very saddening to see your loved ones, being hurt.
that's true.
So how did you handle it? Because that is somewhere which stops you from growing in this path. I mean, somewhere it pulls you back. That are you hurting your loved ones? This is a lot of people, especially the youngsters who are not married, And who wants to follow this path? There's a lot of resistance from the family, and then when they see their mother, especially, who they are so attached to the mother, when they see she getting so hurt, that is where the dilemma comes, whether is it the right path or not. So I would like to, that's why I want you to share your experience, that how was it that your parents, how much time did it take for them to accept everything is fine with you?
Well, my father immediately, my mother some years, to be honest. But I talked with her a lot. We kept talking. She's, she was an academic herself. She's very smart, and she loved philosophy and ideas. So, we talk, and she often would agree with what I was saying. And many times we talked about love. The true love is actually accepting people as they are. Selfish love is that you have to be the way I want you to be. And when we really think about that, that's not real love, actually. It's dependent love. And she understood the concepts. But as you know, it's easy to understand intellectual concepts, but it takes time. Because she began to realize I was still as close to her as ever, if not closer. We were very close, but I took a different path than what she perhaps had thought that I would take. But still, I think that love and respect was always there. And the more she saw me, the more she became happy. Yeah.
Brother Charlie, let's move ahead in your story. And from Melbourne, the first centre, you moved over to all over Australia?
Yes, we actually from Melbourne we started one centre, and then around Australia. Actually, there was one in Sydney already. And then many of the Australians went to all parts of the world, to Europe, to South America, North America, different parts of Asia, and we began meditation centres everywhere. And it's remarkable when you think, really 30 years ago there was virtually no centres outside India, that there's so many in 130 countries. It just says to me there's a need. And I feel, observing the Brahma Kumaris around the world, people, the simplicity, the purity, people really are attracted to that, actually. And I often say in India, you'd be very proud of the image that they give India, because I think, to be very open with you, in our countries, people are resistant to gurus. There's something about that people do have a resistance to, but the purity and the simplicity of the sisters is something I think a lot of the people feel quite comfortable with. That there's not we have a retreat centre outside Sydney, and many people come, many professional people, and they say, we love you because you never force anything on us.
I think the basic thing which people are able to relate to Brahma Kumaris is the acceptance.
Yeah.
Whichever mindset you have, whichever way you are acceptable.
That's right.
That's so beautiful.
That's exactly
that makes you feel so comfortable with yourself.
Yeah. That's so right. And I feel that's true spirituality, because... And even, at our centres we've had priests come and nuns and all sorts of people. But we're all close to each other, because actually the ultimate state of spirituality is the respect and acceptance of everybody. And in Sydney, in Australia, it's a completely diverse community. Now people from every single culture and ethnic group lives there. It's a bit like North America, and yet everyone comes from every imaginable background. Sometimes on our weekend retreats we'll have 30, 40 nationalities there, but we're like a family, which is how we'd love humanity, humanity to treat each other with that soul-conscious respect rather than the arrogance that my culture, my religion, my nationality is better than yours, because that's so much of that in the world today. And that was one of the things I loved about the Brahma Kumaris, that we really, as souls, we are a spiritual family.
It's not important, which sect you belong to, which, which sector you come from, which country you come from. You are what you are. Even, the male-female factor.
Absolutely.
The gender factor, actually, the major fight which is happening today actually finishes off the moment you are in that, soul consciousness, that you are that energy which governs. And I think somewhere, the deep understanding that you are good, you are powerful, you have it in you, and then he's there to give you all the energy to move ahead. That makes you feel very, very strong and empowered. Here I would like to ask, before we just have to wind up the episode, is the moment awakening happens, the moment the realization happens, the moment the transformation, which you must have seen now in these 33 years with a lot of people, how much the continuity of being with the atmosphere is important to keep it permanent. You said it remains, it becomes permanent, but then the moment you move out,
Yeah, it's
again
true.
the reality is something which you just can't ignore.
It's
And
very
you
true.
can always fall back to the same pattern you were earlier.
Which most people do to a
Yeah.
certain
So
extent.
how much the continuity of being in the atmosphere helps people?
Well, I think the Brahma Kumaris suggest, we never force, suggest to meditate and study daily. And I don't think I've missed a day in 33 years. So, and I find those people who do that little bit every day, they look after the family, do the work, but they do their little bit of spiritual study, learning and practice during the day, they're the ones I see who really grow. Some people have a big opening and then they go into the atmosphere of the world, and which touches old feelings and old emotions, so they lose it. But generally I find more and more people, if I can just say briefly, when I started in the 70s, meditation was a bit of a cool hobby. It was a bit fashionable. At least in the Western world, the Beatles did it and that sort of thing. After a while, it became like a discipline in the 80s when the stress thing became huge. But now I see when it's a lifestyle. It's like when, as we were saying earlier, it's not that you practice meditation, it's an attitude to life. I'm a peaceful soul. I carry that into my behavior and my relationships. It's a very rich and fulfilling life, but it does take practice and there will be challenges. But that's the path, to face the challenges and just keep moving forward in a gentle way. And the company is important. When just like almost like we share our life experiences with people, we learn from each other. I've learned a lot from people traveling with me.
Yeah, on this path, in fact, wonderful. It was a beautiful moment to experience your, like the way you have led your life and the way things changed for you, and then moving towards this kind of life for others to get that enlightenment. Thank you so much for being with us, and it was a wonderful experience to have you with us on this show.
Thank you,
Om
Kanapriya. I
Shanti.
appreciate it. Om Shanti.
हर जो अनुभव होता है वो एक अपना यूनिक अनुभव होता है, एक अलग अनूठा अनुभव होता है, लेकिन जब हम उन्हें शेयर करते हैं, जब हम आपके साथ बात करते हैं, वो अनुभव कहीं ना कहीं हमारे लिए भी प्रेरणा का स्रोत बन जाते हैं। ब्रदर चार्ली ने आज हमें बताया कि किस तरह से एक जो मूवमेंट होती है वो एनलाइटनिंग की मूवमेंट होती है, हम एनलाइटन हो सकते हैं, हमें अवेयरनेस आ सकती है, उसके बाद वो कंटिन्यूटी बहुत ज़रूरी है। हमेशा, हर बार, हर लम्हा उस ब्लिस का अनुभव करने के लिए कहीं ना कहीं अवेयरनेस को अपने साथ रखना ज़रूरी है और निरंतरता ज़रूर बनाए रखें। इसीलिए कार्यक्रम के माध्यम से हम भी निरंतर आपके साथ रहते हैं और आपको हर बार उस बात का, क्योंकि हमारी भी कोशिश यही रहती है कि जो भी आपके जीवन में घट रहा है, जो अड़चन आ रही है, उसी का हम जो सल्यूशन है, उसी के हम जवाब साथ तलाशें। कोई ऐसी बात है, कोई ऐसा सवाल जो आपके मन में है, आपका स्वागत है। आप हमें फ़ोन पर या फिर ईमेल द्वारा भी संपर्क कर सकते हैं।
If you wish to discuss your problem or have a question to ask or want to know your nearest Raj Yoga Meditation Center, call us on 09999744555.
अवेकनिंग विद ब्रह्मा कुमारीज़ का ये जो सिलसिला है ये यूँ ही चलता रहेगा। आने वाली कड़ियों में हम ब्रदर चार्ली के साथ ही कुछ और बातें भी करेंगे। उनके एक्सपीरियंस हमने शेयर किए हैं, उनसे कुछ बातें ऐसी जानेंगे जो जीवन में परिवर्तन ला सकती हैं। अब आपसे विदा लेते हैं। ओम शांति।
Om Shanti.